Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Set Point Podcast, the channel that talks about volleyball, leadership, team building, and much more. My name is Cesar Benacci, and I'm here with my brother, Peter Bistocchi. How are you, brother?
What up, Cesar? Hello, everyone. Ready to take notes, eyes and ears open. Let's talk volleyball and much more.
All right. So I'm going to do an introduction here that it's very, very familiar to our guest. We're excited to welcome to the show our friend and mentor, John Mayer. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. It's fun to be with two fellow learners and two awesome people. So thanks for having me.
Cool. Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about John here, give a little bit summarize his big resume. John is from Thousand Oaks, California. As a college player, he started his career at Pierce College, and then where he won 2 state championships, went to Pepperdine and won a national championship in 2005. And then as a professional beach volleyball player, he played in the AVP for many, many years, has 4 AVP titles. If I'm wrong here, if I give some wrong information, correct me, John. Has 4 AVP titles, was the most improved player in 2009, the best defensive player and MVP in 2015. And then as a coach, he started his career at Santa Monica College, where he won the state championship in 2015, was also named Coach of the Year. And since 2014, has been the coach here at LMU now, the head coach for many, many years. The last 5 years was the West Coast Conference champion. Many, many years also Coach of the Year, and 2 times NCAA semifinalist. Is also a USA Volleyball NTDP coach. And he also coaches the Pro Beach team, Betsy Flint and Julius Skos. And it's author of the book and host the podcast, Coach Your Brains Out, which we are a big fan. It's a big inspiration for us here at the Set Point Podcast. So, John, give us a little bit of an insight of your playing career, and then we'll soon go to your coaching career, and then we'll talk volleyball here through the coaching perspective.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the introduction. I always thought it'd be interesting, and I think we did it once on the podcast, where what if you introduced all the bad stuff, which it would be way longer for me. Be like,
I'm pretty sure it was.
Got cut from his basketball team, was the 4th string setter at a junior college, didn't qualify for the AVP his first 5 tries, all these things that are the reality of it, and we always, it's kind to hit on the bright spots, but the bright spots are such small parts of the journey, right? It's so much of it is just definitely failure and struggle, and I'm not good enough, and do I know what I'm doing as both a coach and player? So it's it'd be fun to do that. What if that was always the way? You just you introduce here's all the low lights of a person's career. The question was on my playing career first. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up playing lots of sports. I loved basketball, baseball. I loved football. My parents wouldn't let me play it, American football, because I was too small. I was a really late bloomer. I was super small, super skinny, and somewhat skilled, but people were way more athletic. So I struggled. I mean, I love sport. I was obsessed with sport, but I thought I was going to play in the NBA, and I barely could hang in with my high school basketball team. Then later in high school, I found volleyball, and I really always saw it kind of as a hobby. Basketball was my sport, and I'd play a couple months of volleyball just because my friends were doing it, and maybe it'd help me jump higher for basketball. And then speaking of lowlights, one of the most important things, I got cut from my varsity basketball team. And that's really what took me towards volleyball. I was like, okay, what do I do now? And so then my senior year was the first year I really focused on volleyball. And from there, my high school coach who was a guy named Tom Black, who coaches now at Georgia. I was pretty lucky to have a high school coach who is also an Olympic coach now. He was like, you should pursue the sport. You should try to play at a junior college. Like, I didn't even know there was college volleyball. So he pushed me to do that, and that really took me down the path of playing lots of volleyball. But yeah, I guess to summarize, yeah, I always loved sport, was always obsessed with it, and I don't think I was ever in my playing career the best player on one of my teams anytime. I was always a role player, always trying to be a good teammate, always trying to find a role to help the team. When I was MVP of the AVP and when I was the littlest guy on the basketball team, I was always just, I never like a highlight guy or never the MVP, you know, the best player, just kind of someone who tried to make the team go, help the team out.
Cool. And then at some point, beach volleyball came into your life. How did that happen?
Yeah, when I started taking volleyball more seriously, the end of high school, like my senior year, I was lucky Tom Black was playing beach. He was trying to qualify for the AVP. So my high school coaches were playing, and they suggested doing it, you know, as a kind of a way to improve faster. So I started playing at parks in Thousand Oaks, where I grew up. You know, go to the park and there'd be a sand court, and we'd go play, and then eventually started playing some, you know, open, like unrated tournaments. And I remember going to one of my first tournaments in Manhattan Beach and seeing it was these old guys on the other side. This was back on the big court, and they could barely hit the ball over the net. And me and my friend are just jumping and bouncing balls, and, you know, thought we were good. And then we go play, and they beat us, you know, like 15-2, because they knew how to play and we didn't. You know, so you get humbled on the beach pretty fast. But yeah, I found I loved it. I was so into all of it. You know, we'd go down and play all day with friends and jump at the ocean, and you lose and you'd be off. And it was just a fun kind of culture. And there's no coaching, you know, just try to figure it out. I think I was drawn to a lot of those things. And then I saw how much it helped my indoor game. It was, you know, I'd come back to indoors, I'm jumping higher, I've got better ball control. And then, so yeah, I just kept pursuing it. When I played in college, I'd, you know, play at Pepperdine, and I'd be all in on indoor. And then as soon as the last match of the season, I'd go to the beach and I'd play every day of the summer. And then indoor would start and I'd play every day. So and then that led me to starting to play AVP qualifiers throughout college, and just seeing like this, maybe I can make, you know, maybe I could pursue this. And once I graduated, I had some opportunities to go play indoors overseas, and even the national team talked to me about being a libero. But I was all in on beach, and I was like, I'll give myself 5 years to try to see if I can make something of it and pursue it, and I'll just go all in on it. Can I do it as well as I can? And then that turned into 15 years and a pretty fun career.
Cool. And then you played volleyball on a really great level. So college, you reached a national championship, which is a very, very big accomplishment for here in the United States. And nobody has an idea. I mean, very few people have an idea of how much that represents. And then winning AVP titles as well. What's something that you learned? And then we're going to transition to talking about coaching. What did you learn as a player that you could use as a coach later on in your life?
I think you get a little sense of what's fun and what's addicting about it. So you go, oh yeah, it's really fun when we do, I don't know, something like USA, where there's like multiple balls going and we're competing and there's a scoreboard. And it's not very fun when I'm working on passing and, you know, getting 100 balls in a row and breaking down every little angle. So that, and I think also just an empathy for how hard it is to improve at something, how hard it is, how frustrating it is to want to get better and to struggle with it. So having some empathy for players. I'm sure there's a lot more. I mean, the discipline, you know, the discipline it takes to show up every day, to be consistent in your the psychological, that, you know, the personality you bring, but also the discipline and how am I going to take care of my body and show up and be the best I can be day after day after day. Like I said, I was never the best player on any of my teams. So like with my partners, when I'd have a beach partner, I'd be with a blocker, and I'd want to make sure, okay, all the controllables, I'm going to nail them. Like I'm going to be locked in mentally. I'm going to be physically ready. I'm going to be supportive of them, and they're gonna want to keep playing with me because of that. Maybe not because I'm the most skilled. So I think thinking about like all those little intangibles that aren't so little, trying to bring that as a coach too. What are all the things in my control that I can bring to the table to help my players?
That's amazing. That's amazing. And now going into coaching. So we have most of our audience here, just like your podcast, is a lot of education and a lot of learning. And most of the people that are watching and listening to us want to get better as a coach, as a leader, as someone that is trying to teach volleyball to someone that is starting to play or is playing already or is trying to get to the high level. So now going into coaching, and Peter will run this part.
Well, first of all, John, thank you for being here with us. It's an honor to have you on here. I remember when you said that we should introduce people starting with the bad stuff. And there's this, it reminded me of this saying that we have in Brazil that says, everybody notices the drinks that you have, but nobody cares about the rocks that you carry.
Yeah.
And so
I like that.
that's an interesting perspective. And
Yeah.
so before I ask about coaching, what caught my attention, and then every time we're talking to somebody here, we go like, okay, let's take a second here. What are the lessons that we can learn from this line that our guest said? And in your early start as an athlete, you said that you got hooked by playing, and then you repeated the verb play multiple times.
Mhm.
Then you said that you started with your partner and you guys got like 15-2, but you started playing on beach and you played and you played and you played. And I just wanted to emphasize that we're going to go back to the importance of playing later on here today. But people because everything that I say has, youth volleyball or junior volleyball perspective. So introducing kids to the sport. And I always say that kids show up to our gym because they like to play volleyball. Nobody enjoys staying on the line and waiting for their turn to touch the ball once. And then a lot of times not having to make a decision or read something, just go there, pass the ball, leave, and then go serve a ball, and then go to hitting. And so that, and how much that you played. And then there is in Brazilian, school of sports and physical education, there's this very common concept, and there are lots of books that talk the concept of street pedagogy. Then it's unstructured play, and what are the amazing things that we can learn from this unstructured play? No coaching, no practice, just go there and play and learn by playing. But we're gonna go back to that. But my question for you now is, so you had this amazing career as an athlete that Cesar brilliantly introduced, and then you started with coaching. So I guess my first question for you is, how was the beginning? We know that it's might be difficult for some of us coming from seeing the game from an athlete's perspective, and now I'm in charge of these people. I'm still learning the game, but now from a different perspective, and I have different goals now, which is help my athletes and whatever is the program that I'm in to excel. And that's a big responsibility. And I guess for most of the coaches, if not for everybody, the beginning is tough because you're learning as you go. Most of us learn as we go, a lot of things. So how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was enjoyable. I just don't think I was very good at it. Right away, I was like, oh, this is fun, and they're paying me a little money. Oh, cool. Like, I really like it. But I think the hard part of it, and with any part of coaching, I didn't have any pedagogy. I didn't have any studying. I mean, luckily I got my teaching credential, so I had an education background. So, I had some of those principles to draw from, but I don't even think initially I thought about those. I thought of, just like everybody, I thought about how did my coach run practice? Okay, what did I like? What didn't I like? Let's try that. And, I was really lucky in volleyball, especially, I had some really legendary coaches. I mean, Tom Black, there's a guy named Ken Stanley at Pierce, and I had Marv Dunphy. So I was very lucky to have those to draw from. I think if I would have had worse coaches, I would have been a worse coach, which is sad to think that it wouldn't have been based on my knowledge or my ability. It was just based on the randomness of who I knew, who coached me. And that's unfortunately, I think, what happens a lot is the sort of coach we are is just happenstance because I got coached by these people and that's how they did it. So all do that. So some sort of tradition. So yeah, I didn't have principles. I didn't have evidence to back up what I was doing. I just try stuff or recreate, or just, like paint by numbers. I just put in the colors and okay, that's what you're supposed to do as a coach. And so I still loved it. And I don't think I was great for my players. And you regret, like, I wish I could have been way better for a lot of those teams. But yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I didn't know. So that's the hard part about being a beginner with anything, right?
Right. And as a Brazilian, as a foreigner coming to coach in the US, it always was interesting to me when I talked to any American coaches, because coming from Brazil, you probably know this, you work with the fellow Brazilian there. Every coach, it's by law, you need to have a degree in physical education and sports sciences in Brazil to work anything in the sports industry. And that was a big shock for me culturally when I moved here. And then you see all sorts of coaches. And I was to say, like, the coaches that are great but have no education, the coaches that are great and have the education, the coaches that are not so great and have the education, and to me, the worst ones, the coaches that are not good and have no education whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I guess having the curiosity of looking for the concepts and the things that are going to help you get better as a coach, I think that's a huge step towards coaching. And I think a lot of people that are listening to us and watching us, I mean, if you don't have the education, well, that's okay. Nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
But as long as you're eager to look to get better, I think that's great. But and so that leads me to my next question, which is, you said you had great coaches, and I guess you said that you were lucky, and I agree with you, because you could have had terrible coaches that could have, driven you away from the sport altogether. And so, who are your references in the beginning? I'm guessing some of your best coaches, but who are they?
Yeah, the guys I mentioned, I mean, go into, Tom Black would be the one who's had the biggest influence. He's the one who got me to believe in myself. He's probably the first person in college. He's yeah, and throughout he's mentored me from high school. He coached me in college. He coached me on the beach. He's coached me as a coach. So he's been someone. And I think that probably one of the biggest things I've learned from him is the learner that he is. Like, I've seen him evolve as a coach. He's so much different than the coach he was 20 years ago, because he wants to get better, and he knows what he did last year wasn't as good as he could do in the future. So I think that's one of the best things I've learned from coaches. And the same, I was lucky to play for Marv Dunphy, who coached in 3 Olympic games, and he's on Karch's staff with the U.S. women. I think he's been a part of something like 10 Olympics. He won, I think, 5 national championships at Pepperdine, which is a tiny school in Malibu. Just the things he's done is unbelievable. And it's the same thing. I remember I would, as a player, I was there from 2002 to 2005. And I remember going back to a practice maybe 3 years after I was done and going in to go learn. And I go watch, and he's doing things way differently than we did, or not way differently, but there's little adjustments, or he's evolved, or he's changed this, or he's updating. And you go, this guy who's won gold medals and has done everything that could be done, you'd think he'd be really stubborn and go, I've found the way. I know the way. But to see someone at that level be willing and eager to improve and to change and to look for more effective ways to help people learn and grow, it's big. I guess the last thing I'll say on both Marv and Tom, I think they're really good volleyball minds. They're really curious, like you said. They use evidence-based principles. But beyond all that, like, if they didn't have any educational background, if they didn't have any understanding of motor learning science, they care deeply for me and for my family. They got to know my brother. They got to know my parents. They put their arms around me when I struggled. They so often believed in me more than I believed in myself. And because of them, I'm where I am, and more so because of that stuff than their motor learning knowledge.
And that's amazing. That's something that I always say, that as for myself, that I'm a teacher before I'm a coach. And Cesar always talks to, like, the people before the athletes, and that goes a long way. And I think for both of us, it's the first thing, right? Care about the people, and everything comes after that. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think that's something, I've been lucky this last year around Cesar. I've known him much longer, but that's something he does at a really high level. People are really drawn to him. He really cares for people, and he connects with people, and he makes people feel good. I think that's one of his I mean, he's got many strengths, but that's one of the many I've seen already in the first year. And yeah, it's infectious. If you're a player and you get to have someone who cares for you like that, you're gonna play the sport a long time. You're gonna come in locked in to learn, and you're gonna have a way better experience when someone cares about you like that.
Yeah, yeah. Score,
I
Cesar.
appreciate that.
No, it's
That
just that's just the
comment
truth. Yeah, it's not a it's just what I've observed. It's appreciate you being that person for others.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
think one thing that we didn't mention here that most of the people know, of course, but John and I work together here at LMU, and I'm his assistant here. Been here for almost a year. And it's been such a cool journey, and yeah, we're gonna talk more about that later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
you scored a few points with the boss now, huh?
I don't I'm funny about that stuff. Cesar knows way more than me. I feel like I'm his assistant most days. Where it's a collaboration. I kind of want to get rid of that. We're just both coaches trying to help the team get better, and I'm definitely there's no boss. We're just in it together.
Well, here we go again. Imposter syndrome strikes back.
That's probably true. That's probably true. But
Yeah, that's one thing that he always says from the very beginning. There's no hierarchy. Of course, he has the title of head coach, but yeah, I feel very welcome here, very um, independent. Like gives me a lot of autonomy to work here. But yeah, we'll comment on that later.
all right,
Yeah,
sounds good.
the psychological safety has a huge impact not only for players but for everybody on the staff, I guess, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh, for sure.
So I guess it takes me to my next question. Is you said that, well, I didn't know anything, which I highly doubt that you didn't know anything. But so once we start coaching, and it's once you think you know nothing, it's like, oh, okay, cool, I did this thing and I think it worked, so I'm gonna use this more often. Oh, this thing, it's more like a lab, right? You're trying to apply these things of which sometimes you don't even know the concepts, and then you start forming your beliefs and the system of principles that you apply. And then thank God over time they change because we learn. Like those of us who are constantly looking to learn things, those beliefs may change. Some of them may solidify. Some of those beliefs we change because we learn stuff and we talk to people that know more than us. And I guess that's my next question for you is, what are the beliefs and principles that today you believe you had when you started, and then that they completely changed over time?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say that. I was thinking how initially I probably didn't have principles or wasn't aware of them. It was much more cut and paste. Just that drill works, so I'll do that drill. I'm not quite sure why. I don't have some evidential background to it, so I'm just gonna do that. And then eventually, I started to read up and want to understand the why, and I became. For a long time, I was an athlete and a coach, and then I started to shift from a coach to an athlete, and then now I'm just a coach. So there's like this transition. And as I shifted into that coach first, athlete second, kind of the end of my playing career, yeah, I started to read up more and learn more and ask people like Tom Black and Marvel, like, so why are you doing this? And then they'd bring up things like, well, there's this body of evidence called motor learning. It's been going on for 60 years. And there's all this research that shows, that random reps are better than blocked reps and that we should do things specifically. So yeah, initially I was drawn to that. I'm a lot of John Kessel stuff, a lot of the gold medal squared stuff. I was really drawn to the just evidence-based approach to coaching, and started to form some of my principles. Okay, I've got to be, I remember the law of specificity. Okay, I've got to make sure the net's the right height, got to get the ball at the right, whatever his weight, and we got to do things as specific as possible. Start to understand the idea of keys. Humans, what was the line? You have a limited ability to process information. So teaching in short chunks and giving keys, and you know, those principles, and that's how we started to start this beach program, you know, specificity, keys, and all that in mind. And I think those are really, really strong principles. As I started the shift, I think, which was what your question was, as we went into COVID, I started to question and learn more about this ecological framework and challenge some of those initial principles that I had learned, and that was a whole journey into the next phase. So now I've kind of reframed them and rethought some of them, and yeah, now I'm in a new place. But we can dive more into that as we go.
And that's what we're going to do now.
Okay.
And before we start, I want to give an individual, personal testimonial here. When I was right at that time that we were at home, like during COVID, and a little bit after, of course, that we were going back to all this post-COVID world, which we had no idea what was going to happen. And I was listening to your podcast, Coach Your Brains Out, which is for me the best podcast in training in volleyball ever. And then I always listen and heard you talking about that ecological dynamic constraint-led approach. I was like, what is he talking about? What is that? And I was like, and I started to read. I'm also a very curious person. Always love to learn new things. Always believe that we keep evolving. We are lifelong learners, like we always say here. I was like, man, what is this constraint-led approach, ecological dynamic thing? And the first thing I did was call John. I was like, John, you gotta explain to me what's that? What is this? Because I've been in a gold medal square world for many years, as you have been, and now you're talking about this ecological dynamic that there's some things that are similar, but some things that are really, really different. So, and you're winning all those championships. So I want to do that too. So how do I do that? So, so I started researching. I started diving into those kind of things, and here I am right now working with John, completely immersed on this dynamic. But how did you come across that methodology? Where did you first see it, and what drove you to that?
Got you drinking the Kool-Aid now. I've got you down the rabbit hole.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a big rabbit hole.
Oh,
so
endless.
Yeah, through the podcast, I think that's been such a blessing for me. When I started, I didn't think of this, but that has pushed me to continue to learn from people and to reach out and to go down different avenues. Because if you don't, as a coach, if you don't, like now you guys have worked into your week, I'm going to find someone I can learn from. If you don't, you spend so much of your time task oriented. I've got to respond to this recruit, do this email. I've got to practice plan this, I've got to talk to my administrator. So we don't have that development time built into our space. It's hard to do it because you're busy. You get home, and after all that, I want to watch TV or relax.
Amen.
Yeah. So having the podcast kept me seeking, kept me searching, kept me, okay, I want to find someone I can learn from this week. And it built in that development without realizing it. Built in this for now almost 10 years. So we were going to interview a guy named Steve Bain, Dr. Steve Bain, who has his motor background in motor learning and his PhD. And I was asking Tom Black, so what should we talk to him about? And this was maybe in 2018. And he said, you should talk to him about dynamical systems and ecological dynamics. I said, what is that? He said, I'll ask him. So I emailed Dr. Bain and say, yeah, we'd love to, I'm really into motor learning and would love to learn more. And Tom suggested dynamical systems. And then he responds and he sends me a couple research papers. I think one was Duarte Arujo and Keith Davids. And I would read the extract or the summary, and like, I do not know what is going on here. I am not tracking any of these words. Degeneracy and stochastic resonance and like,
oh my God, yes.
So that's how I felt. That's how I felt the first time.
So I was totally lost. And
did you also have to read it a bajillion times and still understand nothing?
Oh yeah. And so then I respond to him and go, I don't get it. Can we just talk about blocked and random reps? I understand that. So it's kind of a little bit of I think a little bit of the problem of science, the ability to communicate it is, it's one thing to be able to research and find it, but to be able to communicate it to the practitioners. So I think a little bit of the fault there, and then some of it just I'm not that smart, my fixed mindset. I'm not smart enough to understand this. I'll go to what's comfortable. I know about blocked and random, so I'll talk to them about that. So that's what we did, and then it, over the next 2 years, it would come up in different aspects. People would bring up this idea, and I kind of just pushed it off, and then eventually, thanks to COVID, I hate to say thanks, I know it was traumatic and painful for lots of people, but for my learning, it was helpful, and that thing slowed down. And the really big influence was Casey Kreider. And he was someone who was a practitioner, but also someone who has got just an unbelievable understanding of the research. And we would Zoom over and over, and I'd ask really dumb questions, and he'd explain it, and I wouldn't understand, and I'd ask again. And I had other people. Andy Bass was reading the skill acquisition book that you had there, Peter. We went through it together, and he was helping me a ton, explaining like, okay, is a affordance the same as a constraint? What does that mean? And he would break it down and give me examples. And when you have that human person on the field doing it, have them explain it versus reading those research papers, it is a huge difference. And then, after months and months of doing that, I could go back to those research papers and go, oh, I know what affordance means. Oh, okay, they explain that, that. So it started to come together more and more. But it was still, I would say during that process, it was 6 to 8 months of, I think the word in ecological dynamics would be, it was destabilizing. I was questioning, I'm a good coach. I know what I'm doing. I should, no, this isn't right. I'd challenge it, and I remember just sitting up in my bed, my wife coming in and go, are you okay? It's like, I don't know. So I was really questioning it and didn't know. And I felt lost for a while. And that's a scary place to be. But I think that's part of the learning process. You're going to feel when you're learning something new, and you are destabilized and trying to change a really fundamental way that you move, or, way that you see the world. That's going to be traumatic. And it was, but then usually through the struggle comes some growth and some improvement. And that's what I experienced.
Yeah,
we're not alone, Cesar. We're not
no,
alone.
we're not alone, and I'm getting out of the dark right now.
Yeah,
I'm starting to get out of the dark. But the ecological dynamic and constraint-led approach, which is part of the dynamic, it's so complex. It has so many little concepts here and there that are a part of the dynamic. But what would you consider the big rocks? So referencing gold medal squared here, our fellow friends from GMS, what would you consider the big rocks of the ecological dynamic? What's something that you use in your daily work at LMU with the professionals that you find it's really, really essential for our sport?
Yeah. Yeah, and just to make sure to clarify, I have so much respect for Gold Medal Squared, Carl McGowan, and all that they've done. I think there's so much good application, and I wouldn't have seeked out an evidence-based approach, I don't think, without them. And I think this is just the next phase in where skill acquisition is going. But a lot of it, that's the foundation, a lot of the things that Gold Medal Squared brought to volleyball. So I'm really thankful.
Me too.
I would say some of the big rocks are the idea of representative learning. If I love the idea of this idea of a dial. So if we had a dial from 1 to 10, a 10 would be, for beach volleyball, it would be we're at the beach and there's a team and there's refs and there's a crowd and we're playing the sport with some pressure. So you'd have all the psychological aspects. You'd have a consequence for losing. You'd have the fatigue. You'd have all these elements that bring to beach volleyball. And then if we, go down the dial, maybe a 9, it'd be in the practice space, there wouldn't be a crowd or a ref, but we'd be playing something similar to the game, and and as we keep moving down, it'd be less and less game-like. And for me, there's a red zone probably between 1 and 3. Maybe Pepper would be a 1 because it's there's no movement, right? I'm hitting right at someone. There's no net. And so that's an area I'd want to avoid because I don't think the transfer would be very high, and I want to be very purposeful in everything we do. We want it to transfer to performance. We want it to lead to learning. So I think there's a space on the dial where, you know, you want to avoid. And I think it's good as a coach to think about, you know, where's the red zone? And there's times where it makes sense to lower the dial, because to learn something new, you probably can't be in this pressure-filled space where every point feels like the end of the world. You're not gonna try something. You're not gonna explore, which is a big part of learning. So I think it's important as a coach to recognize that purposefully we're gonna go to a 7 or 6 because it's gonna open up some opportunities to learn. Do you want me to go into another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think representativeness is a huge one. If coaches just did that would change so many practices, and there'd be so much more effectiveness in what in activity design. Another one would be variability. You know, I think the traditional view would be variability is bad. We want to do it, you know, the same way. We want repeatability. If we're gonna hit a ball down the line, you know, we want the ball to land in the corner of the line, but we want to do it in the most repeatable way as possible. I'm going to get to this specific spot. My first step is going to be this length, and you know, there's going to be all these repeatable elements to my movement. There's very little variability in that. In the ecological approach, you'd have the same outcome. I want the ball to, you know, a kill down the line in the deep corner. So that's the same in either approach. We want that result. But in the ecological approach, you'd say, how many ways can you do that? Could you do it with no approach? Could you hit it hard down the line? Could you do it with a really long approach? Could you do it after you passed and did a 360? Could you still hit it hard down the line? So you add all this variability. Could you do it when your approach is really wide, when it's when the set is in a different spot? So you actually promote this idea of how many different ways can we perform the task. One, because through the noise, you discover what works. You start to find for your specific, not the coach saying this is the way to do it. The athlete gets to self-organize and discover for their frame and for their dynamics, this is the spot that helps me hit it down the line. But also just, I think, honoring, especially our sport, the uniqueness, the creativity, the randomness, honoring that we want players to do it in many ways as possible. We want to expand their skill set. We want them to be able to hit hard down the line in all these different situations and give them opportunities to try to problem solve that. And that's Cesar and I have been talking about. I've been drawn on the board here behind me. I feel like it was helpful for me, this idea of understanding expertise. So a beginner, so if we had a beginner on a, you know, if we had the XY axis, so if we had a graph, a beginner would be, you know, low expertise but high variability. So they'd have all this unfunctional variability. They'd cross their legs and they wouldn't be able to pass it accurately. They'd fall over and they wouldn't be able to pass accurately. So there's all this variability, but it's not functional. They're not an expert. As they started to improve, you'd see some of that unfunctional variability go away. We'd go down so we'd get away from the variability and we'd go more towards the expertise on this graph. You'd see them, you know, maybe less often crossing their legs or doing something funky with their platform, so you'd see that start to line. And then lots of people would maybe stay there and we just keep them there. But I think the next level is then if you see a real expert, they start to go back up the variability sign and the variability becomes really functional. You know, if I was out today coaching against April Ross, you know, maybe one of the best players in the beach volleyball world. If I asked her to pass with her legs crossed or with one arm or in an overhead, she could put it where she wanted. She has the control. She has this functional variability. So she has lots of tools to respond to randomness. And that's where I think from an ecological perspective, you're opening that up instead of taking that away, where from a more cognitive based informational processing, I think sometimes you're taking away and not looking for that function, not looking for that variability, looking for that repeatability. So those are two. I mean, I think those are two of the big rocks.
No, I think one nice one that we've been discussing a lot, and one idea that you brought for us the last 2 months is the antagonistic versus synchronistic relationship. Talk a little bit about that, because I think this is so important for us when we plan our practices.
Yeah, that one was really helpful for me. That was one Casey Kreider, again, helped me understand. So when you approach things from an ecological approach, you're not in a silo. I'm not just a passer. You're a big part of your environment, and you want to be really sensitive to your environment. And everything you do is connected to the things around you, to the wind, the lights, but for sure the humans. You want to be really sensitive to how what you're doing is interacting with the fellow humans with you, the fellow volleyball players. So when you take that into account, then you want to be really aware of the relationships that form. And the relationships that form in our sport, if you look at volleyball is unique. If you look at most net sports, so if you look at badminton, ping pong, table tennis, tennis, the relationship between you and the opponent is always antagonistic. If I'm playing tennis, I'm trying to make it hard on the other side. I'm antagonizing you. I'm going to put it over there. I'm going to put it short. The relationship I have is to make it as difficult as possible. Volleyball, beach volleyball and indoor volleyball are unique in that there's two components. There's a synchronistic component and an antagonistic. So the synchronistic would be the relationship between, if I'm a passer, I want to be really sensitive to the relationship between me and my setter. I don't want to just pass to a target or a cone or a coach who's catching, because I'm not getting any information. I don't know what situation that puts my setter in. If I become aware and connected to this relationship, my body is going to perform amazing things. It's going to, if I'm aware of this relationship, I'm going to adjust. I'm going to move my feet. I'm going to get my platform in a spot to put my setter in a spot where they're balanced, because I really want them to be able to set accurately, because when they're balanced, they set more accurately. So I'm really attuned to this relationship. I see, okay, my pass, what did that do to the setter? Oh, it moved her backwards. Oh, it got her off balance. Okay, how do I, and every situation is different on this short serve, on this serve to the seam, all these situations, can I be sensitive to, in an indoor, especially the setters coming from all these different routes, right? Okay, in row 3, in row 4, in row 1, how do I want to, on this serve, put them in a helpful spot? So there's the synchronistic, then again, the set to the hitter, the setter's trying to keep the hitter in rhythm. They're aware of what step they're on. They're aware of, did they pass or not? They're really trying to take in all the nuances so they can keep the hitter in rhythm. And then like that, it switches to antagonism. The hitter's going, okay, where's the block? How do I make it hard for them to dig it? And I'm tuning into that antagonism. So I think once you're aware of those relationships, you go, well, why are we hitting with no block up? Why are we serving with no passer? How do we know if that's a good serve? Why are we setting with no hitter? That set, maybe in that situation, the hitter couldn't hit a inside set. They needed something a little bit wider. So you want to, I think if you bring the players' attention to these relationships, they're going to perform accurately, but you want to give them lots of opportunities to interact with it, so then they can improve it at this. And I guess the last part to add is, when the players are aware of it, in practice, they can bring those dynamics to the skill. So for example, for a long time, we would serve and pass, and the server would serve and they'd get an ace and they'd go, sorry about that serve. And, as you think about these relationships, now what we do is, when the server serves and it's easy, we say, yeah, you should say, sorry that I served easy. Yeah, it's flipped. As a server, you want to make it as hard as possible on that passer, and that's how she's going to get better. And that's how you're going to get better, because you're trying to figure out, this serve is making it tough on her. Oh, when I put some spin on it, when I hit it short, and each passer is unique, I'm trying to figure out their weaknesses. So yeah, I think the relationships I think it's such a fun part. There's so many nuances, and it's a huge impact on the way you train and the way where your players put their attention.
For sure. And it impacts directly our ability to coach. Those concepts, and hearing you talk about the synchronistic, antagonistic, that Jason Watson talks a lot about the relationship between one action and the next action has changed a lot the way I coach, the way I see the game. That's very cool. Peter, take over.
No, yeah, sorry. And it seems to click. I feel like sometimes you say game-like, or you say specificity, or even representativeness. You'll explain it to someone, then you go watch, and like, oh, they think game-like is just serving You know, they're serving over the net. There's no passer. We're working on serving. But the relationships takes it to the next level where they have to be, as a coach, you have to really understand. I think that helps clarify it even more deeply.
Right. So,
Definitely,
you know,
definitely.
you mentioned a lot of concepts. So representative learning, and more than that, representative learning dial, which is incredibly important. And you talked about, you know, variability, repeatability, synchronistic versus antagonistic activities. If you think about it, all of these things we see in the game, you can identify those things in the game. So yes, it is hard to come from, you know, a methodology, a philosophy of work, but at the same time, if you stop a second to think about how do those things apply to the game, well, they are the game,
Yeah.
right? And I guess my question for you now is, John, like I said before, everything I ask and I talk about has always a junior volleyball bias, because that's what I do.
Mm.
You know, we prepare the kids for you guys
Mm.
to take over. But volleyball requires, you know, a delicate fusion of, you know, consistency and adaptability, what we're talking about right now, repeatability and variability, or consistency and adaptability.
Mm.
So athletes must perform key skills reliably, yet modify actions, you know, fluidly to meet
Mm.
ever-changing game demands.
Mm.
Since we're looking to develop movement solutions, and I know you talk about this a lot, by manipulating constraints, changing affordances, and here for the coaches who never heard about this, you're gonna get there. How to introduce our sport and its fundamental skills, that is the consistency part of this discussion, to players that have never played before. I think, in other words, for beginners,
Yeah.
how do you think you dose or adjust consistency and adaptability? Because that might be a bit different when you're talking about youngsters, people that never played the sport, and when you talk athletes at a super high level, the level like you guys are at, they know how to pass, they know how to set. So I guess in that XY graph that you talked about, let's talk. I think my question for you is at the beginning, where the expertise is low, the variability is big, but we want them to become more experts and lower that variability a little bit so they can stabilize those fundamental skills. So how do you think we can, as youth volleyball coaches, how can we adjust and implement that ecological dynamic to our U12, U10,
Yeah.
U11 team?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. And you know, you'd be more of the expert. I can give you my shot. And you know, I've gotten to be around my daughter as she's grown up. But I would first say, before any of it, I wouldn't worry about the consistency. I would worry about getting them to want to come back tomorrow. I would think, how can we get them to fall in love with the sport? Like you, I mean, you already mentioned, Peter, at the beginning, like, yeah, how fun can we make it?
Yes.
How can we do it where they're like, oh, we're done. Oh, can we do more? And that's the first violation I've seen the most, is that,
Turn off the lights and kick them out.
yeah. Yeah, I've just seen all these ways that youth coaches, as they're watching my daughters, like they're having a challenge for how unfun they can make volleyball. It's just like this battle of just breaking the game down into the not being the sport. So I think once you accomplish that, say you get them to fall in love with it, and there's lots of ways to do that. I think stuff like smash ball and you know, scaling the game, making it shorter courts, lower nets, lighter balls. I think making it really accessible and giving them opportunities to jump and hit and you know, in that way. So once they've got to that point, then I would go start to talk about the consistency and adaptability. And the first thing I would do when you talk about fundamentals, I think about maybe more foundational principles of each skill. So for passing, let's really be clear about what the goal is of passing. And that goes into the relationship. So let's have a conversation with the players. What is the goal of passing? And you might find some interesting thing from kids: to get it to hit my arms, to get it over the net, to not get aced. You know, it's like, well, let's get a little bit clear. The fundamental skill of passing is to pass it to a spot that your setter could set it. So let's try to do that. What if we put our attention And we had this intention of passing it in a place where the setter can set it. And let's watch what happens after we pass. Let's really get feedback from where it goes. And I would observe first. So I'd observe each player is going to be different, taller, shorter, different, play different sports growing up. So I'd observe. And then as a coach, I would look at what is limiting them from doing it. Not after 1 rep, not after 5 reps, probably after 20 reps, 3 days, see days of it, and then identify, okay, this seems like there's probably 10 things that are limiting it. Which one's happening the most and which one's gonna be something we could actually influence? So once you identify that, then you could start to implement some constraints. We love one that we do. You'll see kids who will get served deep, or elite athletes too. They'll pop up, they'll stand up, and so we could say, keep your shoulders down. We could, we could give them all this feedback, and I think that could be helpful. But, from the constraints-led approach to allow for some problem solving and self-organization, we'll fold up a towel and put it on their shoulders and say, okay, now try to pass it while keeping the towel on. So then they're having to move in a new way, they're having to explore, and they're trying to get the ball forward while keeping the towel on. So I'd do that with each skill and be an observer first and really follow up over and over. What was your goal there? Where were you trying to pass that? Ask lots of questions and get them thinking more and more about where they want to put their attention. And then after a big sample size, then I think about some feedback. I think there could be lots of cues you could give as a coach. Oh, try one where you're, trying to be really stable. Or what would it feel like if you didn't move your arms at all? Or if you did, give them some cues to try. And then I think you'll start to find the consistency will come. But it's not going to come quickly. It's learning's hard. So I think be patient and stay with it.
And in this response, you gave so many hints of other parts of the ecological dynamic that we can explore, like the differential learning and how we give feedback for our athletes, how we guide that process that we talked a lot about here. And there's so many other things that we can talk about.
There's some rabbit holes.
Endless.
And what has stuck with me the most was falling in love with the sport, get them to want to come back. In our gym here, we started a program with 9-year-olds, and then on the first day they're playing volleyball with balloons, right? A bajillion balls on the court, flying balls that never fall on the ground. They're flying forever. Don't let any balls fall on your side, and make them all touch the ground on the other side of the net.
Yeah.
And then for a few days, that's all they want to do. Okay, let's do that. And then eventually we're going to put, balls that are a bit heavier. And then I guess in what you're saying, I think the Italians do it really well. What they do at younger age groups, they do that mini volleyball, 3v3, 2v2, where the kids just touch the ball a lot in their super competitive environment. I think they even have, state championships, even national championships of mini volleyball. I think that's fascinating. And we've seen, like, just recently today, earlier today actually, the Italians, like a super young generation playing in the VNL quarterfinals. Right? They just lost friends, and I was talking to a few friends like how incredible it is to see those young guys playing. But I guess there are a lot of different schools in the world. There's just something that really impresses me, that the way that they do there. Thank you for sharing all those insights and ideas. That's really cool. Cesar, you're up.
We play a sport that, I mean, no sports we don't have like some DNA to be able to play any, but volleyball specifically it's fairly unnatural. Like soccer, or football, there's lots of running, and basketball, you possess the ball, you get to hold the ball and possess it and run around. And not that those are easier, but I think it's maybe initially more fun. You can have fun pretty quickly with it. Where volleyball, it can be really miserable. It can be painful. It can be no action. You can get no exercise. You're standing there. You can make it really unfun. And I think that's where we as coaches have to be really aware of, how do we consider what they're experiencing? How do we bring balloons in? How do we lower, how do we do these things to make them fall in love with it? There's going to be that 1 out of 30 kids who you could do almost anything and they'll fall in love with it. But can you be a good enough coach to get that 29th kid who, you know, hasn't played many sports and isn't sure, like, could you do things that's going to draw them too? I think that's a next level. So yeah, I would say we do it very poorly right now. And I would love to see that's an area for us as a country. And I imagine lots of places to get better at.
That's how I learned how to play, right? You have to learn all the fundamentals first, and then you may have some fun playing the game.
Yeah.
We're trying to do the opposite with our kids.
Exactly.
Learn the game, play the game, change whatever you have to change so you can play the game, or something that is close to the game, and then little by little you introduce those skills. That's
awesome.
pretty cool.
We need more of you all around the country.
This book right here.
All
yeah,
Rise Above the Land. Yeah, that talks a lot about that.
We have it all
as we wrap up this part, John, we want to get information here on our podcast. I know you did the same on your podcast, and we want to make coaching, not just volleyball coaching, but all coaching in general, better. So where do you study the ecological dynamic and all those things that you're talking about? Where and how do you study?
Yeah, I mean, you got to know yourself. So some people, maybe Casey Kreider, could go just study research papers, and that's gonna do it. For me, that's not. Cesar, I think for people like me and you, we want to talk with people and have conversations, listen to podcasts, and probably the most helpful for me was reaching out to people who knew more than me, you know, finding mentors. So, and a lot of the people who do the research, they're so accessible. I mean, I've been able to have conversations with Rob Gray and Jeff Fairbrother and all these people in the, you know, they love to talk to practitioners. You know, they want to see people using this. So you send one email and you're going to get an amazing mind who's going to explain some of the research to you. So I think don't be afraid to reach out, and instead of reading, I mean, try to read the research paper, but instead of just doing that, like, talk to the human behind it. And I think that will be, you can get more into the specifics of what you are. And then I think podcasts, what you guys are doing, Rob Gray's podcast, there's lots of good resources out there. But yeah, you've got to be a commitment as a learner. You got to be curious. It's not enough to look at just Instagram videos. I don't think that's gonna, I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess, but I think to really understand the space, you've got to put in some time and work and curiosity.
Yeah. So a good start would be listen to Coach Your Brains Out podcast and Set Point podcast. That's a great start. And you can reach out to us as well.
I know we do listen to CYBO.
Yeah. Every week. And you can reach out to us and reach out to me and Peter through social media, and John through email, because Instagram is not his thing.
No. But that's what's been cool about doing the podcast too. I've heard from so many coaches over the years and been able to connect with people, and it's way more fun when you feel part of a community. And that's what the podcast, I think, has done, where I think way less people would have reached out to me and built lots of relationships. I mean, I'd say a big reason I was drawn to Cesar, because he's like, oh, he'd ask me about the podcast, he'd read the book, and like, oh, he's a learner, he's curious. This is someone I want, you know, in my program. So I think it goes a long way to, if you're someone who wants to learn, then be proactive. Go reach out to coaches, go reach out to podcast hosts and researchers.
Yeah, and that's probably going to open so many other avenues in your life that you have no idea. I would never imagine I would be hosting a podcast. Never. But
to the young ones out there, talking to people, actually talking to people is good. It's good. Reach out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, John, now we have a little more personal part of our podcast. And so everybody get ready. It's pepper time. All right. The first question is, tell us an important or defining moment of your life that influenced you, who you are today.
It's interesting because you guys had mentioned some of these questions, and I heard G, so I thought about some of them, and I don't think I would have typically brought this up, but I already did because I was thinking about these questions. But I would say that when I got cut from my basketball team, which was,
Amazing.
it was so brutal. I put so much time and hard work and wanted it so bad, and it felt like the end of the world. And yeah, felt like I wasn't good enough. But what's amazing, here, what was I then, 17, and now I'm 42, so almost 25 years later, how that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. But when you're in it, sometimes, and what do you make of it, right? When you run against an obstacle, how long do you commiserate, and how long do you feel bad for yourself, and what community do you have around you? I was lucky to have Tom Black be my high school coach in volleyball, so I got to go to that environment and got to chase a new dream. But yeah, if I wouldn't have got cut, if the coach would have kept me on the team, I probably would have been on the bench, and that would have been the end of my athletic career, and no volleyball for me at all. And I've met my family, my wife, my friends. It's just brought so much to my life. So it's interesting to think how these traumatic moments can lead to something great. I guess somewhat, like I said, a lot of luck. I was lucky to be around good people, but also the way I responded.
Cool. And we thank that coach too, because
Yeah, thank you to
brother.
whoever cut you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Question number 2. What are your favorite books?
Ooh, favorites. There's a lot.
I knew it.
I mean, some of my all-time favorites, there's a book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which is
That's a
about,
great one.
yeah, about understanding how our species work, understanding how powerful stories are. More related to coaching, I mean, I ate up all the John Wooden books. Those were some of my initial education in coaching, just reading about how Coach Wooden would do it. More recently, Rob Gray, How We Learn to Move. I thought that book was really impactful. And you guys were asking earlier about a good starting place. That's a great one. I actually have here in my microphone stand, The Language of Coaching by Nick Winkelman. I think that one was really helpful. We had him on the podcast. He was really good. A lot on like cueing and feedback and constraints. Those would be some of my favorites. I just read Transforming Basketball by Alex Sarama. I thought that was really, really good. I'd recommend that if you're interested in the ecological space. Even though it's a basketball book, it's just a coaching book. So I'd recommend that. And then I really like
podcast too.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. Yeah. I try to mix up. Like I just read a Stephen King book. I try to mix it up. I try to be well-rounded. I mean, mostly I read nonfiction, but I just read, it's called 11/22/63. It was about the JFK assassination. I enjoy history a lot, so I'll try to mix it up a little bit.
Very, very nice.
Very
yeah, read,
awesome.
people. I'll say this again every episode. Please, there's no way to get there without reading and educating yourself. Let's read more.
Yeah.
And I'm here talking to 2 authors. So read, people, read.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So John, who are your mentors?
Now you remind me of authors. I should mention, I thought Billy Allen's book, The Inner Night, was really good. People, give him a shout out. He's a great author. Mentors, I've mentioned some of them. Marv Dunphy, been a huge mentor. Tom Black, those two, probably the longest lasting. And I mean, now anytime I got to see Tom Black when I was out at my daughter's Junior Olympics in Dallas, and we got dinner, and I get to see Marv a couple times a year, and I just always look forward to it, and I learn something when I'm around them. More recently, it's funny to say Casey Kreider. He's 7 years younger than me, but I'd consider him a mentor. He's taught me a lot. I've learned a lot from him. A guy named Andy Bass, who we have on the podcast, who's also younger than me. He's mental skills coach with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He has been a huge one. Bernie Holiday is another sports psychologist who has been, helped me understand. He's given me feedback as a coach and on our program, and he's brought eyes to lots of the ways we do things. So I think it's helpful to have those different, someone maybe in skill acquisition, someone who understands mental skills, maybe someone on the leadership side like Marv. So having mentors who understand different you know, different parts of coaching, because coaching, there's so much to it. It's complex, right?
Definitely.
Right. We all need mentors. That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, next question. If you, John, could change one thing in the world of sport, what would it be?
We already did this one. I'd make it more fun for kids. It's
There you go.
I would change youth sport, and I can't speak worldwide, but in our country, I've gotten to go through it again with my daughter, where we're forcing kids to specialize early. We're making 9-year-old soccer games feel like they're so important. I'm seeing parents are rushing the field of a 9-year-old game because they think it's, I mean, it's cool to care, but to put that much pressure on a kid who's, you know, just running around kicking a ball with their friends, you know, and then you see the kids after, they don't even remember who won or lost. They're just excited to, you know, get an ice cream with their friend. So yeah, I think just what we've done to sport to make it less fun. And I'm not one who, I think competition is great. I think there's a way to make it healthy. I think there's a way for kids, you know, I think to learn consequences in a healthy way. I just think it's gotten too far in lots of places. So yeah, I think just make it more fun for kids and give kids a chance to play more sports. I always, my dream would be to start a club where it was like a donor sport club. So you could choose a primary sport. So let's say my primary sport is volleyball. So you get to do that for 4 months, but then you have to do tennis for 2 months. And then you do ping pong for 2 months. You have to play these other like net sports, or you have to do, you know, like be a well-rounded player first. And then maybe you'd switch your sport because you found something. But the business model of getting 10-year-olds to commit to a sport for 11 months and every weekend is taken away, and it's taken some of the joy out of sports. So yeah, that's what I'd do.
That's a powerful, very powerful message.
Very, very incredible. John, the next one is, what do you regret the most?
I would say, I don't think in terms of regret a lot. I think if I could do it over, I wish I would have been a learner sooner. I think the book, another book I should have mentioned was the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. That was a game changer in who I became. I think I had a fixed mindset about a lot of things. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I still do that, but I've gotten a lot better. But I'd say I sat through so many classes in school where I wasn't curious. I didn't learn. I just wanted to get the grade, just wanted to get through it. You know, in college, I think I wasted a lot of time where I could have been learning so much, and I didn't. And I wish I would have been a learner sooner. I'm thankful I've changed my ways. I'd love to be an even better learner, but I'm thankful that I have become one in my adult life. And but I'm bummed that I missed out on a lot.
Right. Well, I think Carol Dweck's mindset is a game changer for everybody that reads it.
Everybody.
Right. That's
Yeah.
such a good book. Such a good book.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Let's get that coin and flip it. Now, what are you most proud of?
When I thought of this one, I was thinking just being a dad. Proud to something I probably always wanted to be, and now getting to see my daughter, an 11-year-old. I'm proud of her and getting to be a part of her life. And yeah, just hoping I don't screw it up too much, but proud, recognizing how hard it is and all the stress it is and how you don't know what you're doing half the time. But what a journey to get to be a part of and do. And I'm proud that I have a great partner, my wife, to do it with. So yeah, that's something. Yeah.
And I can say you guys do a really, really good job. Really good job. Yeah,
Thank you.
my daughter Liz, her idol is Mila, John's and Paula's daughter. It's really cool to see.
They're cute.
John, yeah, for sure. Now something that nobody knows. So no one knows that John.
That was a hard one for me. Some people know this, but not many people know, is that I had 3 punk rock bands that I was in. So I was a drummer in high school and
And
college.
here I go on YouTube and Google to look for that.
Yeah, it looks pretty deep. You might be able to find a song somewhere. But yeah, I love music and would go to, little $5 shows in basements, and we would play shows, and some of my best friends are from those bands, and we still will play music together. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's something people wouldn't expect from, sometimes there's that jock, like sport expectation, where I feel like I have a more creative side, and I enjoy creativity. And maybe that's the punk rock idea of thinking outside the box and not following the crowd. That's part of probably what's drawn me to the ecological approach. I also have, I mean, people know too, but I have a history club, pretty nerdy, but for 4 years since COVID, we were watching a documentary on the Cold War, and we meet every week and talk about history. So yeah, those are
It's
two.
amazing.
Yeah.
The
I
musician
know.
side, I've experienced the musician.
Yeah, we've
I've
jammed.
I
had a
know.
session, we jammed one time.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know that Cesar is gonna ask all LMU athletes to watch or listen to this podcast. So everyone, you need to ask John to perform, to put a performance for you all,
Yeah.
and record it so that I can see it.
With Cez, the two of us.
Yeah, let's go.
Cez can play.
Let's go. And Peter plays too.
Do you? What do you play?
Yeah,
I play the
plays
piano.
guitar.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I
Nice.
play
And guitar too, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my music
All
career was on the
musicians.
piano, but yeah. All right. So, okay, let's keep filling the blank. Family is
Say my support system. They're what yeah, I was especially thinking when things get stressful or overwhelming, to come home and feel like you're supported and loved, and it keeps you going. And I'm very lucky in that my wife was a volleyball player, and she loves our LMU team, and she's so understanding of all the demands, the travel, and she's so supportive. And I think when I doubt or question, am I doing things right, she's got my back. And also my daughter, she's basically been like a member of the team since she was a little kid. Like she feels a part of the team. So yeah, it just feels like more support of yeah, it's such a challenging job coaching. It's how you need support, right? If you don't have that, man, it can be hard. It already is hard.
right.
Yeah,
Very nice.
for sure.
Very cool.
Very cool. And at the same line, sport is
I mean, it's made up games. It's stuff that was just made up. But
That's very interesting.
which is cool that we made it up as a species, that it's the teacher of life lessons in a safe environment, unless we screw it up. But where a lot of the lessons we learn, maybe in war or in conflict, they're very dangerous. They can, you can die, or you can be permanently, where sport, it's safe, and you get to learn how to respond to failure, and you get to learn how to communicate, and you get to learn how to solve hard problems. And then you get, the whistle ends the game, and you get to go home and do something else. So I think it's one of the best teachers of important life lessons. As long as, yeah, the adults don't mess it up, it can be that.
Very
Well,
cool.
I have to say this, all the cool things you said about sport, but after I heard you mention Harari's Sapiens and then the History Club, I
Yeah.
knew that you were gonna mention something about made up
Yeah.
games and wars and
Yeah.
a way to exert your dominance and something like that. I find it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's really cool. All right, John, could you recommend 2 people to be our guests on Sat Point Podcast and to come on here and have a chat with Cesar and myself?
Yeah, I mean, it probably could give you more than 2, but
Please do.
We'd love to.
yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to, like I said, been talk to a lot of good people. I mean, one of my favorites that we'll have recurring is Andy Bass. I think he's just that ability of, he's got his PhD, that a scientist who I talked about earlier, who can communicate in pragmatic ways, you know, versus a scientist who can't communicate, or it's like hard for a layperson to understand. I think he has that down so well, and he's really well rounded. He can speak on the mental skills, he can speak on the motor learning side. So I'd strongly recommend him. I mean, I'm a big fan of Joe Trinzi.
Joe is
I think,
brilliant.
yeah, brilliant mind, brilliant, brilliant from a statistician. And sometimes you can just think of him as that, as just he knows numbers, but he's also brilliant as a coach. He understands, he thinks of so many creative ways to like the way he turned like differential learning into this Goldilocks method idea where you try something, you know, maybe serving, you toss one to your left, one to your right, and then you find the Goldilocks zone. Like he's been able to translate some of the motor learning concepts that are maybe hard to grasp. So I think, yeah, I'd start with those two, but there's a lot of great ones.
Cesar, you're in charge of getting us a list of everybody, since John is
Oh,
probably
man.
next door to you right
I
now.
will complete that list in a few minutes.
What's your guys' goal on Brazilian, like Portuguese episodes to English? Do you guys have a percentage, or is it just see who you want to talk to?
It's a great question. I don't know if
we
thought about that.
want to talk to as many people as possible. So
Yeah.
there are, I don't think there's a like a set goal, as long as,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think we were very we have a very selfish goal at first, which is for ourselves to learn.
Yeah.
And then we happen to be sharing this knowledge with, you know, everybody that's watching and listening. And then so yeah, any good people are good people.
That's
I
great.
think.
Yeah.
I think the final goal is to have one episode in Portuguese and one episode in English per week. So we are gonna interview, how many weeks we have in a year? 54 maybe?
52.
Yeah, something like that. 52.
Yeah, 52, 50, I don't know. Let's say 100 people per year. So being 50.
That would
That's
be
the
great.
final
Yeah.
goal. I know it's very not easy, but that's the final goal.
And how are they different for you guys when it is in English versus in Portuguese? Like, how do you guys experience it? You know, I've only experienced the English one, so I don't know. Like, what is that like for you guys?
It's, for me, it's very similar. It's actually almost the same.
I think for me, what might change a little bit, it's the form itself and the structure is the same, right? But I think how we experience different schools of volleyball, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, or maybe the culture, and how coaches and athletes face the sport. That's very interesting to me. And as I can say for myself, I try to, what is the best that I can learn from our American guests, and from our Brazilian guests, and make a good, you know, a good mix.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I could see how it'd be less the language and more the cultural constraints, like their background, where they grew up, and all those. Yeah,
and all the differences, right? We're talking about this ecological dynamic and, you know, constraints, and while you were talking it, I was thinking, like, in my head, the PE teacher that is working in a very, very small town in Brazil that has one ball for the whole school, and maybe one broken net, sometimes not even a net, and has to make up a net. And how can that teacher introduce the sport in a way that's interesting and engaging for their kids? And it starts from that until, you know, national team. So this spectrum and how things change and vary in this spectrum, that's really interesting to me. And
I remember that I had my roommate in college was Brazilian, a guy named Pedro Leal, one of my favorite people. And I remember, you know, my life experience, just knowing, you know, growing up in Southern California, knowing volleyball, experiencing sports the way I had. And I remember we went down, he was one of my first beach partners, and we went down to play at the beach, and someone was complaining about the antenna, like we had an older one. And I remember him saying to me, he's like, where I grew up, we would put bamboo up and we would be stoked to have like you know, I was like, oh my God, you know, it's just like his appreciation and his association with the sport. And you go,
Yeah,
how
it
much that
definitely
could,
changes your perspective on things.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And talking to people in Brazil and here and living what we had lived in Brazil and living what we live here in the United States give us so much more, so many different perspectives in life that
Yeah,
uh, you say, hey, this is my truth. Maybe it's not someone
yeah,
else's truth. And I learned to respect that.
yeah.
Right.
So that's really nice to
No, that,
interact with people from all over.
it takes me to, I always go to ecological, like the variability you guys have,
Yeah.
you guys have this, and even just from a
Mhm.
language perspective, I mean, it's so impressive how you guys can speak so, just, you can communicate so clearly and so concisely and so accurately in two different languages. It's just, it's very, very impressive. And yeah, wish I could do it too. Yeah.
Peter is
It,
way better than me.
No, you
it's
guys,
it's an
10
everyday
times better.
struggle. It's an everyday struggle.
Yeah.
Well, the moment you go like, oh, screw this, I'm just gonna talk, and
yeah,
I hope you
You,
understand me. And if you don't, and I tell
you
everybody,
free
whenever
up,
I say
yeah.
something wrong, fix me.
yeah,
It's point that out, because I want to
yeah,
fix it. So
Mhm.
yeah,
yeah.
that's
Oh,
how it works for me.
I bet that lesson of going through that helped you become a better learner, like to put yourself out and be that
Oh,
Definitely.
vulnerable.
absolutely. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Definitely.
Like
awesome.
when I
I
got
was,
the last thing that happened is I got these maybe 3 or 4 books on ecological dynamic, and I'm a big, um, on textbooks and a lot of references. We were talking this before we started, and I started reading this, and I'm like, okay, I like this because it's all referenced and all that, but I think right now I have to go with this simpler book to get me introduced to the
Yeah,
concepts,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then maybe I'll go dive into it, because not only to me, I've been working with this like last year, if anything, but not only it's all new concepts, but it's also, and not in my mother language.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's a double the challenge.
No, that's impressive. That's really cool.
Cool. John, let's go to the last one here. So we have mainly volleyball coaches listening to us, watching us, have players, we have enthusiasts, people that love volleyball, love to learn, maybe coaches from other sports that love your podcast, our podcast. So leave a message to all of these people.
A lot of pressure. I think what the theme we've been hitting on, look for ways to keep growing, look for ways to keep learning, challenge yourself in new ways. And I'd say that's not enough. Just to insert information into your brain, like, oh, I read this book or I listened to this podcast. I think that's an awesome step. But don't stop there. Go do what Peter did and start speaking the language. Go like, okay, even go out to coach and try to implement it and mess it up and say, when I mess up, help me. I want to get better. Like, go, experiential knowledge that's what we want. We want to experience things. We want to, what we understand, we want to go try it instead of just sitting there. Oh, I took in all this information and that doesn't get us anywhere. I think you need both. But make sure you go experience it. Go give it a shot. Go mess it up. And that's going to be the real learning, because you're going to then improve it the next time, and you're going to continue to become a better coach or better player because you gave it a shot.
Awesome. What a message. What a strong message, and a great way to finish our podcast for today. We're here almost 1 hour and a half of true learning. That's great. John, I want to thank you for devoting this time to talk to us. And I am such a big fan of you, of your work. I have been for many, many years. And now I can experience and learn with you on a daily basis. And to see your a few things catch my attention working with you on a daily basis and getting to know you more deeply is your commitment to excellence is remarkable. It's incredible. Such a nice experience to be there with you on a daily basis and seeing that learning, being curious, exploring all those concepts that we take from the ecological dynamic to life are really, really remarkable the way you do it. And thinking outside the box, I think one big thing that I learned here this last year working with you is to don't be afraid to think outside the box, to try something new, to mess up, to create something. If it doesn't work, it's fine. You're going to learn something throughout this journey. And the most important thing for me is the way you care about people. That it resonates with me so much because I'm this way. And so I thank you for being here on our podcast, and I thank you for everything that you have been doing for me here at LMU, and for welcoming my family, my daughter, my wife to our lives, to your life, to your family's life as well. So thank you so much.
Says you're too kind. You're the best.
No,
Marv would say, Marv Dunphy, my coach, the best part of coaching is you get to choose the people you go through life with, and that's what makes this program, and that I get to come in each day and spend time with Cez and Benny, who's got two awesome people who are learners, who are great parents, who care for people, and they love the sport. Like that, I get to do that every day. It's what a profession, what a job. It doesn't feel like a job. It's a lot of hard work.
True.
But it's awesome to get to do with people that you care for and enjoy being around. So I'm lucky to have you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Man, I got to talk to the host of the podcast that I literally listen to every day in my car, going to work and back from work.
Hopefully it didn't disappoint.
That was a huge honor, John, to have you on and talk to you more personally. And if you allow me, I'm going to reach out with a bajillion questions I'm not going to say on a daily basis because I know you have a life.
I'm in.
But if you open that door for me, so I mean, I am going to use it, man. So thank you. Thank you so much for accepting, our invitation to be here on Sapot Podcast. I wish you, your program, your family, your projects, so CYBO and everything that you do, more and more success on a daily basis. And I think that the biggest lesson for me here today was that just like science and its concepts, as long as we keep looking and we keep learning and we keep trying, things change. And thank God they change, right? And so all we do, and it's crystal clear to me when I listen to you talk, how much you care about the people that are under your leadership, and the amount of knowledge that with the communication platforms that you have about volleyball, and not only volleyball, it starts with volleyball. Volleyball is like the métier that we have, but the amount of lives that you impact, not only in America, but everybody around the world that can listen to English and understands English, that I don't think you have idea how much you reach out. Your knowledge, it's out there. And so on behalf of everybody that listens to, CYBO, and thank you for doing this. You inspired, I think I can say for both Cesar and myself, you inspired us in doing this for, our fellow coaches and teachers in Brazil. And we are so much in need of more ways to learn and more sources, that having you here, which is such a caliber as a coach and an athlete, it's huge. So thank you so much. And there's so much more that I wanted to ask you on here.
We'll do it again.
Keep on record. Let's do it again.
Yeah, you can bet on it.
Yeah. And then to everybody that listened to us and then that watched us, don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, come back, watch it again, listen to it again. I know I'll do it. And most importantly, don't forget to come back to check the next one. See you guys later.
Cool. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for staying with us until this point, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
guys. Thank you.
All right.